Hello and welcome to Inside Europe, the weekly current affairs podcast and radio programme from DW, Germany's international broadcaster. I'm Kate Laycock in Bonn.
Sirens brings back memories, traumas, and every reminder that there is a kind of threat.
Sirens on Cyprus. Impressions from the Mediterranean island thrust once again to the forefront of European security concerns. Hostile neighbours, how anti-Ukrainian rhetoric came to dominate Viktor Orban's re-election campaign. And Paris decides, will municipal elections see the French capital swing to the right? That's all coming up here on Inside Europe. This week, our roundup of European news is written by Laura Kabelka and presented by Lavinia Pitu.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has faced criticism after suggesting the EU should pursue a more interest-driven and less consensus-based foreign policy as the global rules-based order weakens. Supporters of Ursula von der Leyen said her remarks reflected a necessary dose of geopolitical realism. Critics, however, warned that this kind of wording could encourage Europeans to overlook violations of international law. The backlash was particularly strong in Spain, where the socialist government of Pedro Sánchez publicly criticized the Commission president. Sánchez is already at odds with von der Leyen over the US and Israeli strikes on Iran, which he has condemned as a clear breach of international law. In response on Wednesday, von der Leyen stressed that the EU's support for the rules-based international order remains, quote, unwavering. Her prominent role in responding to the Middle East crisis has also raised concerns among some diplomats that she may be encroaching on the responsibilities of the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, whose office formally leads the bloc's foreign diplomacy. Romanian President Nicu Orban announced this week that Romania's top defense council has approved a US request to temporarily deploy military equipment and personnel to Romania amid tensions linked to the war in the Middle East. The United States plans to use the air bases for surveillance and aerial refueling missions. Around 500 US troops and defensive equipment could be sent to Romania, but the decision still requires approval from the Romanian parliament. Dunn stressed that the equipment is defensive, saying Romanians, quote, have no reason to worry. He also said Romania and other European countries are pursuing diplomatic efforts to stop the conflict, while authorities are helping Romanian citizens return home from the region. The Defense Council discussion comes as the war in the Middle East spills closer to Europe, with NATO intercepting Iranian missiles over Turkey and a drone strike hitting a British airbase in Cyprus earlier this month. Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, one of Turkey's most prominent opposition figures and a key rival to Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has appeared in court in a high-profile corruption trial that critics say is politically motivated. Prosecutors accuse him and more than 400 co-defendants of running a criminal network involving bribery and rigging public tenders, charges he denies. The trial began with tense exchanges between İmamoğlu and the judge after the mayor was initially prevented from speaking in court. İmamoğlu has been in jail for nearly a year, and prosecutors are seeking an extraordinary sentence of over 2,000 years in prison. His arrest in 2025 sparked mass protests in Turkey, with supporters arguing the case is meant to block a popular opposition leader who could challenge Erdogan in future presidential elections. Critics warn the trial highlights growing concerns about judicial independence and democratic backsliding in Turkey. German Culture Minister Wolfram Weimar has cancelled the German Bookstore Award ceremony at the Leipzig Book Fair after facing criticism for removing 3 left-wing bookstores from the list of nominees. The bookstores were excluded using a mechanism which allows ministries to consult the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution before granting state funding. The ministry said the decision was based on information relevant to the protection of the Constitution, but added that the details were classified. The 3 bookshops had previously received the award, and this year an expert jury had again deemed them worthy of the prize. The annual award recognizes around 100 small bookstores and comes with prize money ranging from 7,000 to 25,000 euros. On Wednesday, lawyers representing the excluded bookstores accused Weimar of actively deceiving them, pointing to an email they say he sent on February 10th, saying the shops had simply not been selected for an award.
Lavinia Pitu with that roundup of European news, recorded on Thursday 12th of March. For more up-to-date headlines and analysis from a European perspective, you can go to dw.com or download DW's Breaking World News app. This is Inside Europe, and I'm Kate Laycock in Bonn. As the war begun by the US and Israeli attacks on Iran last month expands, European eyes are focused on an island in the Mediterranean whose surface area is roughly equivalent to that of the Yellowstone National Park in the USA. Cyprus is no stranger to conflict. In 1974, Turkey invaded the north in response to a Greek government-backed military coup on the island, and Cyprus has effectively been partitioned ever since, with the northern third run by a Turkish Cypriot government and the southern two-thirds by the internationally recognised government led by Greek Cypriots. The Greek Cypriot Republic of Cyprus is home to 2 British RAF bases, and it is those bases and British decisions about what they can be used for in the current conflict with Iran that have put Cyprus quite literally in the firing line. To understand more about Cyprus's role in the current conflict, and about the history which got us here, I spoke to DW's Cyprus correspondent, Lukianos Louritsas.
So, Cyprus was Britain's colony for almost a century. Britain took administrative control of the island in 1878. In the 50s, there was a Greek Cypriot independence movement. So after 4 years of conflict and negotiations, Cyprus gained independence in 1960 with the creation of the Republic of Cyprus. Britain was allowed to keep 2 areas of land as sovereign military bases. Together, they form what we call today the sovereign base areas, which remain under British control.
And that issue of sovereignty is, I think, going to be key to my next question. So on March the 1st, the RAF Ekrateri base was hit by a drone, we think fired from Lebanon. Now, this happened shortly after the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer had announced that he had granted the US permission to conduct airstrikes on Iranian capabilities using British bases for a, quote, specific and limited defensive purpose. Was the Cypriot government consulted about that decision?
No, the short answer is no. The Cyprus government does not have to be formally consulted when the United Kingdom decides how to use its bases in Cyprus. In the case you mentioned, the Cyprus government indicated that it had received assurances that the bases would be used only for humanitarian reasons. The government spokesperson, Konstantinos Letibiotis, stated that despite the assurances previously given by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, there was no clear clarification that the British bases in Cyprus will be used for army purpose other than humanitarian. So after the events of the 1st March, the Cyprus government showed dissatisfaction that the Britons did not clarify that the British bases will be used in a way that puts Cyprus in danger.
What has been the fallout?
Okay, so the places around the bases, for sure they have this feeling of uncertainty and safety because of the evacuations. More than 1,000 people were forced to leave the areas. In the other cities of Cyprus, life proceeds normally, but the event of the first March gave this feeling of Cyprus in a way is involved in the war. So we have all of these measures on the ground with the government trying to fix the safe places, asking for the citizens to download a certain application which can be used if an airstrike occurs. And this is an ongoing debate regarding how prepared Cyprus is after all if something occurs. Secondly, there was a demonstration asking for the British bases to leave Cyprus. There is a renewal of a debate regarding the bases.
You raised the question there of preparedness. Now, promises of military defensive support have been made not only by Britain, a naval destroyer is underway as we record this, but also by various European allies as well. Where are we at the moment with that? And what does Cyprus want or expect from its European partners?
Okay. Greece has already sent a ship, some aircrafts. France have been promising a Charles de Gaulle frigate to be at Cyprus at some point, maybe probably today. Italy, Holland are sending equipment, ships and anti-drone systems. And we keep receiving visitors. Only yesterday, Greece Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis came, Emmanuel Macron came to Cyprus. The current situation gave the Republic of Cyprus the opportunity basically to address Europe for this military support and protection through a stronger military presence. However, and this is my analysis, the request from the Republic of Cyprus is not really about the risk arising from the war in Iran and the Middle East. The end game, let's say, of the Republic of Cyprus essentially concerns the Cyprus problem itself, while it may be now calling on European forces to protect Cyprus. My assessment is that the Cyprus government is in fact inviting Euro powers to turn their attention to Cyprus and signal their presence, not only because of Iran war, but also because of the island's ongoing division.
You know, listening to this, I'm just so conscious that, of course, we're talking here about a place where there is real living memory of war, of military invasion, right? Turkey invaded Cyprus in 1974. A lot of people are going to remember that, or at least have been told about it by their parents. And at the moment, with this military build-up and, with actual drones coming towards the island, I'm wondering what that does to people. What are the sorts of memories that are being reawakened? What's the psychological state of people in Cyprus at the moment?
I really like that question because I witnessed it every day. What I've noticed is that Sirens brings back memories, traumas, and every reminder that there is a kind of threat bring back traumas for Cypriots. I know lots of people, older people, that remembers the event of 1974, which are getting anxious and stressed, not by hearing sirens, by listening to the media talking about sirens. They get stressed even from the description that there is alarm somewhere in Cyprus, even if they don't hear it.
My thanks to DW Cyprus correspondent Lugianos Luritsas for taking time to share that historically rooted perspective with me on what I imagine must be one of the busiest weeks of his career. Now, tensions between Ukraine and Hungary have been running high for years. But in recent days, the verbal escalation has reached new and frankly quite surreal heights, with President Orban on Wednesday even going so far as to release a video purportedly showing him ringing his daughters to warn them about supposed Ukrainian threats to their lives. This follows remarks made by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky last week, in which he said that he would, quote, give the address of one person, understood to be Orban, to Ukrainian soldiers so that they could call and speak to him in their own language, comments for which the European Commission issued a stern reprimand. So, how did it come to this? And what might it have to do with Hungary's upcoming elections in April? From Budapest, Stefan Boss reports.
Anya, mikor jön haza apa?
This 33-second video, released by Prime Minister Viktor Orban's Fidesz party, shows a little girl weeping at a window. "Mom, when is Dad coming home? Where is he now? When will I see him again?" A tear drops from the mother's eye as she answers softly, "Soon." The scenes are intercut with images of her father at war and then, finally, kneeling in rain-soaked mud before being executed at close range. Then a male voice warns, "Let's not allow others to decide the fate of our families." April 12th, 2026. War only takes away from everyone. Let's not take the risk. Fidesz is the safe choice.
Ne kockáztassunk. A Fidesz a biztos választás.
The message of the artificial intelligence-generated clip is clear. The war in Ukraine is dangerous, and only a vote for Viktor Orban's Fidesz party will keep Hungary out of it. With only weeks to go before April's all-crucial elections and the opposition leading in the polls, Orban's Fidesz party has, rhetorically at least, brought the war in Ukraine to the streets of Budapest, making fear of mobilization a key part of its bid to stay in power. And that's the context in which Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's exasperated quip about giving Orban's address to Ukrainian soldiers so that they could speak to him in their own language landed. At a protest outside the Ukrainian embassy in Budapest, supporters of Orban accused Zelensky of trying to overthrow the government and install opposition leader Péter Magyar. Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó went even further, accusing Ukraine's leader of seeking to kill the prime minister.
Látva a sikertelenséget azonban,
He says President Zelensky threatened Hungary's prime minister with death. This shows what they are really like. This is how they behave. They threaten and they blackmail.
ez egyrészt
Szijjártó also defended the brief detention of 7 Ukrainian couriers traveling through Hungary in armored vehicles. Authorities say they were carrying 35 million euros, $40 million, and 9 kilograms of gold. The 7 men were later returned to Ukraine, but Hungarian authorities seized the cash and gold. Kiev says the money belonged to a Ukrainian state bank. Hungarian officials argue the valuables may belong to what they call a Ukrainian war mafia. However, it is not the transfer of cash, but a transfer of oil that is at the sticky heart of Viktor Orban's resentment of Ukraine. A controversial compromise negotiated at the beginning of the war enabled Hungary to keep importing Russian oil despite European Union sanctions. That oil came via the Druzhba, or Friendship, pipeline, which passes through Ukraine. The pipeline has been out of action since late January, and whilst Ukraine says the damage was caused by a Russian attack, President Zelensky has made it clear that he has no intention of facilitating its repair. In retaliation, Hungary vetoed part of a €90 billion EU financial assistance package for Ukraine. That has infuriated Ukrainian President Zelensky.
It's simply anti-European when one person blocks decisions that are important for the entire continent or that have already been agreed upon.
Orban's government, in turn, accuses Ukraine of interfering in Hungary's politics and supporting the opposition. In particular, Fidesz supporters have accused opposition leader Péter Magyar of receiving money from Kiev and Brussels to carry out a pro-war agenda, charges he strongly denies. Magyar also denies the veracity of an intimate video which the Fidesz party has threatened to publish, allegedly showing Magyar and a former girlfriend in an apartment in which drugs are present. Magyar denies taking drugs and argues the threat is part of a campaign, portraying him as an irresponsible and pro-war leader. He accuses Orban of manipulating voters and avoiding debate on domestic issues.
The Hungarian government spent more than 1,300 billion Hungarian forint in 5 years for this propaganda. However, I would be happy to speak about the condition and state of play in Hungary, about the Hungarian workers, about the Hungarian minimum wage, which is 668 euros per month. 668 euros per month. I would be happy to ask the Prime Minister about the minimum pension, which is 70 euros per month.
Magyar has also accused Orban of siphoning off billions of euros from the state budget and European Union subsidies to friends and family members, and claims that the Hungarian Prime Minister is cooperating with Russian secret services to influence the election. Several Russian military intelligence officers, including a deputy chief of staff to the Russian president, have reportedly arrived in Budapest to assist Prime Minister Orban's election campaign. The Russian embassy denies the accusations and Orban rejects any wrongdoing. In the meantime, his campaign continues. In a letter sent out to Hungarian households this week, the Prime Minister pledges to cut utility bills by up to 30%, despite the global price spike. And in online videos like this one, in which he visits wounded ethnic Hungarian soldiers repatriated from Ukraine, Orban again underscores his key campaign message, that only he can keep Hungary out of the war. Stefan Bos, DW, Budapest.
Just a quick reminder that our address for all your comments, questions and story ideas is insideeurope@dw.com. I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. You're listening to Inside Europe.
When headlines get louder, we go deeper.
Say hello to Berlin Briefing,
Your guide to Germany's impact on the world. Between East and West, autocrats and democrats, Germany's whole system is under stress.
pressure from all sides.
And the world around Germany is getting more dangerous.
Is democracy glitching? Too much noise? Too little clarity?
We decode what it means for you. From Berlin to right where you are.
It's all in Berlin Briefing on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
If opinion polls are correct, then France is poised to swing to the right over the course of local elections taking place over 2 rounds starting this Sunday. Could Paris, which has been run by a socialist for a quarter of a century, buck the trend? The result is predicted to be tight, with the race for the Hôtel de Ville expected to come down to a duel between Emmanuel Grégoire, the socialist deputy mayor seeking to extend his party's Parisian legacy, and Rachida Dati, the centre-right heavyweight hoping to claim the capital for the Conservatives. And this time, for the first time ever, Parisians will elect their mayor directly, a reform that gives the post more democratic weight, more political glamour, and perhaps more national resonance than ever before. Our Paris correspondent, John Lawrenson, has been taking the pulse of the city.
Paris.
A campaign film for Emmanuel Grégoire, the man polls say should scrape home to become next mayor of Paris. A film full of bicycles, planting of urban vegetation and swimming in the River Seine, ethnic diversity and sexual orientation inclusivity. Grégoire, like incumbent mayor Anne Hidalgo, is a socialist allied with the ecologists and the communists, though not the more hard-left France Unbowed. He promises to continue the progressive and green politics of his predecessor, who turned the crosstown expressway into a pedestrian zone, put a 50-kilometre-an-hour speed limit on the ring road around the city, and made the Seine swimmable again.
Le projet que nous proposons
Pour Paris, c'est un projet de gauche.
Grégoire says his programme is a left-wing one, with housing as its priority. He intends to put an end to the tent cities occupied by homeless people, many of them migrants, that have sprung up in some parts of Paris. He says he will do this by creating 4,000 new places in emergency accommodation. He's also promising to create new social housing for 30,000 people and affordable housing for another 30,000. He also intends to intensify his fight against Airbnb, which has put a lot of flats out of reach of Parisian renters.
Paris est la ville lumière. Elle est cette capitale mondiale.
Grégoire's main rival, Conservative Republican Rachida Dati, says that the City of Light has been brought low by decades of socialist misrule, which has made the streets of this city dirty and unsafe. If elected, she will, she says, clean up the city, kill the rats, and double the municipal police force. She also intends to bring down the city's large debt by reducing the budget for official receptions and the expenses of municipal employees and cutting funding for many associations. In sum, she intends to bring an end to a period when, she says, left-wing ideology has taken precedence over the interests of ordinary Parisians.
De l'idéologie comme seul projet politique.
In many other towns and cities in France, Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella's National Rally look set to make gains. That's not the case in Paris. The National Rally and before that the National Front have never been popular in the capital. However, for these elections, a far-right candidate is making waves.
Vous êtes-vous déjà promené sous le métro aérien entre Barbès et Stalingrad?
Her name is Sarah Knafo. She's the life partner of and was the chief advisor to Éric Zemmour, the founder of the nationalist Reconquest Party, which is more right-wing than National Rally. She's proposing radical solutions for Paris. She wants a massively expanded and armed municipal police and the so-called reconquest of neighbourhoods she describes as lawless zones. She would also roll back the anti-car measures taken by Anne Hidalgo. She's tipped to come third in the first round on Sunday with about 13% of the vote. Out in the streets of Paris, I meet supporters of all three of these candidates in no time at all.
Je vote pour qui? Je vote pour Sarah Knafo sans peine. Parce que son programme.
Who am I voting for? Sarah Knafo. No hesitation. Why? I like her programme. Bringing the speed limit on the ring road back up, for example. At 50 kilometers an hour, there are more traffic jams and more accidents.
Je dirais quelqu'un de centriste.
I'll go for someone in the centre, like the Deputy Mayor, Emmanuel Grégoire. It's quite good what Anne Hidalgo did as mayor. We breathe better in Paris. She improved air quality here, so I'd like us to continue in that direction.
On aimerait bien continuer dans cette direction-là. Knafo, elle n'a pas beaucoup de chance, mais elle est bien.
Knafo has little chance of winning, but she's good. Great even. I agree with everything she says, but I'll probably vote for Dati because she's a better bet for beating the left. We've had enough of Hidalgo and Grégoire. The debt, the trash in the streets, the endless roadworks, and we pay very high local taxes for that.
C'est un scandale, et on paye des impôts très conséquents.
It will, say the polls, be close. Parisians will be glued to their screens on Sunday night to see how this is going to play out. Although local, these elections are widely regarded as a political test ahead of the presidential elections in 2027. John Lawrenson, DW, Paris.
We will have more on the French municipal elections next week when our focus will shift to the provinces. That's Inside Europe, hosted by me, Kate Laycock. Welcome back to Inside Europe, the weekly current affairs podcast and radio programme from DW, Germany's international broadcaster. I'm Kate Laycock in Bonn. This week, the trial began of the popular mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, on charges including bribery and extortion in what Amnesty International's Deputy Europe Director describes as a, quote, politically motivated prosecution which bears the hallmarks of an attempt to intimidate political opponents of the government and silence wider dissent in the country. The trial begins almost exactly a year after İmamoğlu's jailing in March 2025 sparked large-scale anti-government protests, which were met with a government crackdown involving mass arrests and detentions. After reporting on those protests, journalist Yelena Gosteli began examining how surveillance technology was being used in the crackdown. Her investigation raises uncomfortable questions with far-reaching implications, and not just for Turkey.
It's been almost a year since crowds first gathered in Saraçhane in central Istanbul after the jailing of the city's mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu. What began there quickly spread across Turkey. People from all walks of life joined the protests, but it was the youth who led them, and in many ways they were the ones who paid the highest price. Around 2,000 were detained during the protests and their immediate aftermath, and hundreds faced charges. Many were banned from leaving the country, faced house arrest, and more than 200 spent at least 20 days behind bars in Silivri, a high-security prison near Istanbul. One night last March, Onur, whose name we changed to protect his identity, returned home from a protest thinking he would simply go again the next day and, just like the day before, stay out of trouble. But within hours, police were at his door.
I woke up with rifles, flashlights, and a bunch of men shouting at me. I couldn't understand what's happening. That was a bit shocking for me. I really was not expecting them. They destroy my home, I can tell that. Some of my stuff damaged. Well, after my home busting, we go to the Vatan Emniyet, the main police caracal of the Istanbul. The conditions there horrible. Well, we slept on the floors. That was really ugly, I can say that. There was heavy smell of the shit and piss on that spot. And lights were opened 7/24, like they never closed it. So we lost our understanding of the time very quickly.
In fact, Onur's file contained almost nothing, just some personal details, the date of his arrest, and a single photo of him at a protest, standing in the crowd. Hundreds of pages of court and police documents that I obtained showed that the majority of the more than 800 people prosecuted after the protests faced exactly the same charge, attending an unauthorized gathering and refusing to disperse. The main evidence against them was, again, a surveillance photograph. Those files became the starting point for investigating how Turkey is increasingly using surveillance technology not just to police protests, but to prosecute dissent, and to jail people like Onur for simply showing up at a protest. Some of the companies supplying this technology to Turkish police have received EU research funding, raising questions about oversight and accountability. The indictments refer to a shadowy V institution responsible for what they call closed source research and tracing individuals. Defense attorneys have called the secrecy a major problem, arguing that the evidence should not be admissible in court. Hürrem Sönmez is the General Secretary of the Istanbul Bar Association and closely followed the trials.
For example, the people identified through photographs were later detained in early morning house raids. However, we do not consider those photographs to be legally admissible evidences. In fact, most of them are not even of a quality that would allow for proper identification. Yet they were still presented as evidence.
At the protests, the surveillance was impossible to miss. The drones buzzing overhead, cameras on police vehicles, plainclothes officers filming demonstrators, and police asking young people to remove face coverings before dispersing them. Turkey has monitored protests for years, but as these prosecutions unfolded, something else was happening in parallel. Public tender documents show that Turkish police has been purchasing facial recognition technology worth hundreds of thousands of euros. Ali Yerlikaya, the interior minister at the time, made no secret of the push.
İstanbul'da biz şu andaki kameralarla biz onlardan daha iyi yakalamayalım.
In interviews with CNN Turk, he promised that there won't be a place without cameras on the streets of Istanbul. He spoke of plans to integrate private security cameras into a single centralized system and to equip officers with body cameras. The argument is that this will make policing more accountable and help fight crime. What has changed isn't just the presence of surveillance technology, but the integration of cameras, databases, and biometric systems, creating something far more powerful than isolated surveillance tools, as Ahmet Sabancı, an independent researcher, explains.
I think along with the facial recognition and other things, there is also the amount of data the government has about the citizens and the things they can connect, like considering how much like security cameras and CCTVs around the major squares and all of that data comes together, like it's much more easier to figure out where everyone is or who the protesters are or what kind of things they have done before.
In 2022, Turkey rolled out a national biometric data system, a centralized platform accessible to security agencies as well as the ministries of Interior and Migration. Tender documents from September 2024 and March 2025 show police purchasing various components of facial recognition systems, including more than 16,000 cameras. Some of the core hardware, specifically facial recognition servers, was supplied by Netaş, a Turkish telecommunications company partly owned by the Chinese telecom giant ZTE. ZTE, which has a controlling stake of 48% on Netaş, is classified by the European Commission as a high-risk vendor under EU security rules. And yet, Netaş has participated in EU-funded research programs, including projects that, while broad in nature, appear to overlap with surveillance technology. The company also continues to benefit indirectly from EU Horizon funding through its role in a cross-border research consortium. Two more companies known to provide facial recognition equipment to Turkey's police, defense companies Aselsan and Avelsan, are also participating in ongoing EU research projects under Horizon Europe. None of the companies responded to requests for comment. In response to the investigation, the European Commission said in a written statement, quote,
Article 19 of the Horizon Europe regulation requires that all activities carried out under the programme comply with ethical and integrity principles and with applicable EU, international and national law. This obligation applies equally to beneficiaries in associated countries.
In other words, EU-funded research must follow the rules. The European Union adopted the AI Act in 2024, the bloc's landmark law regulating artificial intelligence. It bans certain high-risk uses, including some forms of real-time biometric surveillance in public spaces. Rights organizations argue that the law is full of loopholes and exemptions. Meanwhile, in Turkey, beyond the general data protection rules, there is no comprehensive law governing the use of artificial intelligence, and no specific legal framework regulating how it's deployed in policing. Onur's case dragged on for months before it was finally closed. By then, the damage had already been done. Time in jail and the weight of prosecution had derailed his studies. For many young people, the trials served as a warning, a deterrent aimed at an entire generation of activists who took to the streets in March last year. And the broader crackdown has not let up. Hundreds of people linked to the main opposition party, CHP, have been detained or arrested. Yet a year later, Onur says he can still see a positive side.
There's a different way of doing politics, not the main opposition and main parties. You can do your political activity in your local area more differently, and it can affect more quicker, more effectively.
Ilenia Gostoli, DW, Istanbul.
Yelenia Gostoli's investigation was supported by Follow the Money and New Lines magazine. Now, there was a time when the weather was a guaranteed safe topic of conversation. Not anymore, it seems. Come to think of it, there was a time when the rain in Spain allegedly fell mostly on the plain. But as the unprecedented rainfall that hit Spain and Portugal at the beginning of the year showed, that's not really true either. And new research from World Weather Attribution shows that Spain's wettest days are now around a third wetter than they were before the planet warmed by 1.3 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. However, as this report by the World's Jerry Haddon reveals, Spanish meteorologists and weather reporters have been finding that when they draw attention to these kinds of causal links, be it flood or drought, they inadvertently become bellwethers of an altogether different type of storm.
Back in 2023, Spain was in a terrible drought. One TV weatherwoman, Isabel Moreno, took to showing a map of Europe. Day after day, week after week, you could see all the rain falling in northern Europe, but nary a drop here. One day, Moreno decided to lead her forecast with 4 words: the rain skirts Spain. She says she thought it sounded punchy.
Y claro, me empezaron a llegar decenas y decenas y decenas de mensajes.
And suddenly, I started getting dozens and dozens of threats, she told a Spanish radio station recently. People said, "Why isn't it raining? Is it because of the little airplanes?" They accused me of being part of a conspiracy, insulting me, she said, and threatening my life. The little airplane conspiracy involves a secret cabal of scientists and governments seeding the sky with chemicals that destroy rain clouds. The smoking gun for those who buy into the plot, the so-called white chemtrails in the sky left behind by the planes. This chemtrail conspiracy has been debunked by scientists the world over, but that just makes some people believe it more. Like a farmer I met in southern Spain during that same 2023 drought. We were talking about solar energy, but Antonio Torres kept glancing at the sky behind me. Look at the white tendrils up there, he said, spinning me around. I could see a bunch of what the aviation industry calls condensation trails, or contrails, caused by jet fuel, but for Torres, it was something else.
Todos los días que sale una nube, hay 4, 5 o 6 aviones.
Every day that we have clouds, he told me, 4 or 5 planes appear spraying silver iodide to dissolve them. It was a government conspiracy, he said, to dry out his land and drive him from it. Why? So the solar panel companies could move in. It didn't occur to Torres that Spain's prolonged drought could have been the result of more extreme weather patterns caused by climate change.
Y el implicarnos en contar algo que es incómodo, porque implica que no podemos mantenernos igual.
Spanish public TV weatherman Martín Barrero says when meteorologists weigh in to explain this, it makes some people uncomfortable because climate change means humanity must change, he says. And some people who are reluctant to accept this become climate change deniers. And worse, he says, they even begin to doubt the daily forecast. And to target the public faces of those forecasts, the friendly and once trusted weatherman or woman.
Las cuentas oficiales de AEMET en la red social X
Rubén del Campo, with Spain's meteorological agency, says 1 out of 4 comments on the agency's posts on X are hateful or threatening. It wears you down, he says. I once saw a post with my picture saying that I'd forbidden people to talk about cold fronts. 1 out of 4 is a minority, but Del Campo says when you're talking hundreds of thousands of hateful comments on a single post, it can be brutal. There's self-censorship happening among us, he says. The science is still getting done, but fewer meteorologists are willing to show their face to explain it to the world. If you've got important findings, he says, but don't share them publicly, they lose their impact. And if it requires warning the public about extreme weather linked to climate change, he says, and no one steps forward, people's lives could be endangered.
That report first aired on The World. Find The World wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. We're with The World, Public Radio's leading global news program.
We cover the biggest news events developing every day and give you the context you need to make sense of them.
And Carolyn, I also like our smaller stories, tales of discovery and human kindness, things that make us laugh.
Stories that kind of shrink our world and make us feel more connected.
Subscribe and listen every weekday to The World.
Now, does talking about seasons count as talking about the weather? I'm asking because in Norwegian tourism terms, we are currently at the tail end of the winter season. Think Northern Lights, husky adventures and feeding reindeer. As far as some locals in Tromso, in the Arctic north of Norway, are concerned, that season can't end soon enough. How do I know that? Because Lars Bavanger has been there.
Reindeer here. Arctic capital by platform 3.
Tromso might be closer to the North Pole than it is to London or Paris, but in the city centre you'll see more tourists than locals. Here at the main bus station, tour coaches are lined up to take them reindeer feeding or on a tour of this self-proclaimed Arctic capital. Last winter season, more than 350,000 international visitors travelled here to a city of less than 80,000 citizens. Where have you travelled from?
Italy.
Italy, ok. Why Tromso?
Patrizia, perché siamo venuti a Tromso?
Why?
Perché è bellissima la Norvegia.
Sì. Beautiful, beautiful.
Because it's gorgeous.
We come for the Northern Lights mainly.
Yeah.
Can I ask you where you're from?
China.
China? Yeah. Are you happy with what you've seen so far?
Yeah.
Very happy.
Very nice city.
My name is Trond Arne Kongsli, and I am the CEO of Best Arctic Group, which is a tourism group located in Tromso in northern Norway. It really has exploded. It has doubled the amount of guests in Tromso since 2019.
So for your company, that must be just great. Are there any challenges?
Of course, there are challenges. The growth has sort of attracted a lot of new players. Some serious, some not that serious, making the competition a bit unfair because they don't play according to the same rules.
In fact, this year, police have made a range of arrests and expelled foreign nationals who've been offering Northern Lights safaris with no licence nor experience. These cowboy operators could earn up to €9,000 on one trip. This commuter bus from the city centre across to the mainland illustrates the impact of tourism on the locals. It's absolutely packed with tourists and often impossible to board, leaving people who simply want to go home after work stranded. And here's why. The end of the line is the base station of a gondola going up a mountain that offers spectacular views of the entire city. It's become a magnet for TikTok and Instagram tourists, and you can expect to be queuing up for nearly 2 hours to get on it. And it's minus 10 degrees Celsius.
My name is Christopher. I'm a 17-year-old from Tromso. In my floor in my apartment, there are all the other flats are Airbnb. So when I come home from school yesterday, tourists come in my house and they said, "Here's where I'm going to sleep. Here's where I'm going to live." And I said, "No, you have to the other room." "No, what paid? I paid." It showed me this Airbnb account, but and that's not the first time that it's happened.
Do you understand people who say it's enough now, it's gone too far?
Yeah, 100%. The infrastructure does not have the capacity to take all the tourists we have today. But I think the tourists are a good thing, and I believe most people in Tromso believe that as well, and see all the good stuff that comes out with having all the tourists in Tromso. So.
The tourist boom is good news for the hospitality industry, like this cafe near the harbour. But hotels are at 90% capacity in the winter season, meaning the market for private hire, like Airbnb, is ripe. The municipality has now ordered a sustainability report to see how they can accommodate the growing number of tourists while preventing further negative consequences. Håkon Christensen from the Spore consultancy firm is responsible for the report.
There seems to be plenty of things being done correctly, but they don't seem to solve the problem. And there's some friction between local population and tourism when it comes to the level of Airbnb rentals. The other big issue is traffic safety. Narrow roads, winter conditions, snowy roads, tourists in hired cars that are not used to driving on winter conditions sometimes can create situations that are dangerous for all.
That was Sami traditional singing called Yoik.
Despite its very remote location, Tromso seems to be able to offer limitless attractions. Right now, for instance, indigenous Sami reindeer racers are being pulled on skis at speed down the main street, while thousands have lined up to watch. But it is clear that if this city wants to retain its best assets, closeness and respect for nature, respect for the indigenous population, and, for now, friendly locals, something has to be done. When the winter season ends in some weeks from now, there will be some respite for the locals. For a month or so, when the midnight sun crowds start arriving. Lars Bavanger, DW, Tromso.
I am definitely not forswearing future Norwegian holidays, but I will promise to tread lightly in Tromso. I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. You're listening to Inside Europe. And finally, a good old-fashioned European food story. Yes, we still do them. Tagliatelle, tortellini, lasagna. They all come from the Italian city of Bologna, although not Bolognese, confusingly. Ask a Bolognese, they will put you straight. Anyway, the aforementioned pasta types are all made from fresh egg pasta, known locally as la sfoglia, and the people who make it, traditionally women, are known as sfogline. But how do you know that you're getting the real McCoy? Simple. Look for the words DECO, a certification that the municipality is now giving to those who still do things according to tradition. Who better than Danny Mitzman to get her teeth into this story?
When I have visitors, Sfogliarina is one of my favourite places to take them for a dish of traditional pasta in downtown Bologna. Its name is a play on the words Sfoglina, a woman who makes handmade pasta, and Rina, the name of a lady who started the business over 60 years ago. Back then it was a tiny shop or bottega where she sold her freshly made specialities.
First they used to produce the pasta only for their families, and then when women started to become more active and go to work outdoor, nobody had time to make pasta, so some of them opened there, and that's what happened with my husband's grandmother, for example. She started her business,
which Katrin van Kanigem and her husband Lorenzo run today.
In the 63, she said, what can I do? I can make a work out of this. And as she did, a lot of women did. And Bologna was full of this little bottega. And then the most of them died eventually because nobody knew that art anymore. But then some of us actually saw the potential of it and the beauty of it, because it's a story, it's really an interesting story. It's a story of strength, of resistance almost.
And that's exactly where the DECO certification comes in, which is, you may ask, well, it's a sort of municipal brand of authenticity invented, funnily enough, around the time Rina started her business. It was the brainchild of Luigi Veronelli, a renowned journalist, philosopher and anarchist, but above all, a gastronome. As manufactured foods began flooding the Italian market, he believed traditional small-scale producers should be defended and protected.
My name is Duccio Caccioni. I'm the chairman of the Commission of Denominazione Comunale.
Or DECO for short.
The idea was to give an absolutely free certification.
Which really makes a difference when you think of the bureaucratic costs for a lot of food certifications. A DECO-certified sfoglia maker simply has to make pasta the traditional way, with a kilo of flour, 1 egg and a rolling pin.
In Italy we have hundreds and hundreds, thousands of typical products. Then it's important to have a distinction between a good and a false product, typical product. Then this kind of certification is made by the mayor of the town. But it's a collective certification. It's the citizens of Bologna that make this certification, that they check the product.
And how do we check? By going to restaurants and
Testing.
shops?
Simply testing, yeah.
It sounds like a great job.
Yeah.
Duccio says there's nothing wrong with pasta made using machinery, but the difference has to be recognised.
In this case, in the product that is certified by DECO, the cost is completely different. Everything is made by hands, using the mattarello.
A rolling pin.
A rolling pin, and it's not possible to use any kind of machinery.
And what difference does that make, though, to the product? Why is it better to make it by hand?
Oh, this foglia is completely different. And the flavor and the consistency is completely different.
And when it comes to pasta like tortelloni and tortellini, which are filled and sealed by hand, that individuality is what makes them special.
Every tortellino is different by another. The real tortellino is tiny like this finger.
like your fingernail, perhaps.
Yeah.
Rolling the dough with the rolling pin instead of is only one of the steps. It needs a lot of manuality. It needs strength. You need to stay up all day, on your feet. It's a really tough job, actually. So it's important that there is a recognition on this, and it's not only my mother or my grandmother taught me so I can make, we are running a business based on this.
And Catherine says it's helping to attract more people to the job, not just female sfogliener, but also more male sfogliini. And there's an increasing interest among younger generations too.
When I met my husband, there were really his grandmother, her cousin, which was even older than her, and elder women. And now we have most of our people in the production venue are under 35 of age. And so this DECO will give this job some recognition.
And on the suggestion of Duccio Caccioni, as an upstanding citizen, I will continue in my commitment to the crucial role of making sure that La Sfoglia meets traditional standards by tasting it regularly. Danny Mitzman for DW in Bologna.
Grazie, Danny, and buon appetito. That's it for today. Inside Europe comes to you from DW in Bonn.